But we looked at what Steve had done, and these 2 or 3 short stories looked like he could be the next new wave writer. Yeah. And I had to stop that.
Yeah, we had to turn him onto the true path.
You brought him into the dark side.
Yes, onto the true path of storytelling instead of Dorothy Parker incident stories or descriptions, or there is this thing called plot in addition to character.
Yeah, I think that I've often said that more literary writing is constructed so that they try to see if they can create a story with as little incident as possible. It's like if there was a typhoon yesterday and an earthquake tomorrow, that story will take place this afternoon.
Yeah.
They actually try to avoid that. And I think that classical storytelling has lasted as long as it has because people understand that life has incident. And so absolutely, I could easily have gone in that direction. And my memory of that entire thing, and of course, memory is always kind of separate from truth, is that they brought me this idea. They mentioned this idea about a kind of frisky frog-like critter that eats its own pollywogs, and the pollywogs eat algae, and that's the entire ecosystem. And that when somebody removes the frogs, a tremendous number of these pollywogs grow up to be something kind of dangerous. And I remember going home to my wife and saying, "Now I've done a novelette and or novella and a novel with Larry, and these guys were just on the New York Times bestseller list. They're interested in me doing a short story about this. What kind of idiot would I be to let them get away with that? No. This is a novel." So it was like, it was very definite. First of all, it had to be the truth. I had to actually see where a novel could be in there. But the way I remember it is I saw this as an opportunity to move my career forward. And also, I knew that if I could survive in a room with both of them, that I would learn things that there was no school in the world could teach me. And it was brutal at times because these guys suffer fools less gladly than anybody I've ever met. And Jerry would be on one side of the room tearing up my stuff, and Larry would be on the other side of the room tearing up my stuff, and Jerry would be saying, "We're murdering Barnes's precious prose." Was your mother scared by a gerund, Barnes?
I actually said that.
Oh yeah, I've never forgotten that. So it was great fun.
I think your mother was scared by a gerund. Yes.
So
you had more ways of inserting gerunds into a simple sentence than any other human being I've ever seen in my life.
So were you trying to sneak stuff past them every now and then?
No, not at all. I was doing my level. I was trying to bring my A game every single day. Trust me, there was no way.
Can I tell a paragraph story?
Please.
I will tell this because it's instructive in several ways. Understand, Steve has a degree in English. He has a good formal education. They don't teach in high schools and colleges what they did, what I learned in 5th grade. I looked at a draft he had done of a couple of scenes, and understand the way this kind of worked was that Niven and I did some of the prose, but a lot of the times we set the scene, and here's this scene. Why don't you see what you can do with it? And see. So I'm looking at this scene Steve has done, and I finally looked at it and I said, there's just something weird here about the paragraphing. And Steve looks at me and he says, "I don't really know what a paragraph is." And I said, a paragraph is a group of words, a group of sentences expressing a complete thought, the subject of which is the topic of which is given in the topic sentence. And he looks at me, and I think I had to explain a little bit about what topic sentence means. And it was like watching a light bulb go over his head, and the next day he brings in the stuff and it's paragraphed in a reasonable manner. Now this, I think, is instructive, Because and I'm sure Larry, learned in 5th grade the formal definition of a paragraph. And while I don't believe that you can teach creative writing, I think people either have a talent for it or they don't. You can teach report writing, but that's a different thing. You certainly can teach the principles of the English language, and I sort of fault the school system for trying to keep it a secret that a paragraph is a group of sentences expressing a single thought, which is described in the topic sentence. Very strange.
Yeah, it isn't in No Child Left Behind, so they just kind of dropped it.
Apparently, I don't know what it is in the end.
No writer left behind.
No.
Yeah, no writer. No,
No
the way
student.
you make sure no child is left behind is make sure none get ahead. But that's an entirely a different story.
So you're familiar with the American public education system.
Yeah, I never was a product of it, but I'm familiar with it. I am a product of the Catholic schools, and
I was a teacher back in the 90s, and I had a brilliant student. And he didn't know enough English to write at the 2nd grade level, and he did not know fractions. The reason I say he was a brilliant student was because when I ran a stock game, he could pick every stock that went up. He would just have people read the articles to him. He'd have an instinctual understanding. I had to explain fractions to him in the 12th grade. It took me about 45 minutes. He was brilliant. No one had just bothered to do it.
That's not bad.
So I could see where, yeah, that can be frustrating. I have a question concerning one aspect of collaboration, which would be conflict. Sometimes my brother and I will just get into these knockdown dragouts. You don't see this character at all. Right now we're in something called crack or collapse with the character, a central character in one of our books. Whether this person cracks or collapses, and we still haven't resolved it. Frankly, because the person who used to resolve these things is no longer with us, sadly.
Yeah, I can fix that. The agreement between Jerry and me, he didn't give you all the parameters. There are 2 more. One is one of us has got to have the veto power. Otherwise, we could be stuck herring off like that. And the person who gets the veto power is me.
Yes.
And the second was...
Wait, can we give you our veto power since
Second was Jerry was going to rewrite A Mote in God's Eye from scratch to smooth out inconsistencies in style. That turned out to be necessary near the beginning, but it just faded away as we learned a consistent style between us.
the first couple of books, it took some work to, but with Mote, for instance, I defy you to figure out who wrote which scenes. Most people think, well, I must have done the action scenes and Larry did description scenes. Not necessarily true.
When Robert Heinlein, who knew us both quite well and our writing too, tried to figure out who had written what, whenever he got specific, he was wrong about half the time.
Do you guys plot out, or did you plot out, and this is to all 3 of you, before you got somewhere, or would you often leave surprises, like you bring a character to a precipice and let's see how Larry or Steve is going to handle this?
We did a lot of talking.
Got it.
Yeah.
A lot of talking. In fact, Jerry and I were both taking the position of teachers
Yeah.
and teaching each other and ourselves as we went, of course.
Yeah.
You learn a lot by being a teacher.
After all, Larry had taken the courses from the famous writers' school,
It's true.
and I never had, so I had to learn a lot of that.
Steve, you were going to say?
Well, I was going to say that it's possible. I know that when Peter Straub and Stephen King worked together, I guess it was on The Talisman, one of them would leave a cliffhanger for the other. But I think that there's a certain amount of stunt involved in that. What I was interested in doing was learning. Even now, when I work with Larry, there's no question I'm going to want him to have the final word on things. I let him correct me. I take his judgment on things for multiple reasons. Just, there's still things to learn. I'm going to learn as much as I can, whenever I can. And the idea is to produce the best book possible. I certainly enjoy amusing myself, but it's not about that. It's about trying to create an experience for the reader.